I'm pretty sure that the chainsaw has stopped running. Fingers crossed. Hello friends! So if you're like me and you really like having as much control over your projects as possible, you've probably spent hours and hours and hours looking through prints and not found any that you actually like, but you've had a really clear picture in your head of exactly what you want. I have that problem a lot. It might just be me. But for Christmas one year, my mom got me like a screen printing kit, and that's when I discovered that I don't actually have the commitment to make a full screen, because like it's a whole process, and then once you have the screen of that pattern is the pattern you have, you know? And I couldn't think of any one pattern that I wanted, but I had all this ink and screen painting paint, and I was like, how am I gonna use this? And so I figured out this stencil technique that I'm about to show you, and while it is a little bit more difficult design-wise and in execution, I think that the benefit of being able to cheaply and easily, somewhat easily, get exactly what you want far outweighs, you know, the finagling that you have to do with it. But we'll get into that in a minute. I just wanted to show you real quick the final product, a little bit of the final product, and talk about how it sews up, because I've already started the project that I'm going to be making this into. I can't show you yet because the pattern hasn't been released yet, but we're very excited. And the needle does go through it really easily and nicely. The needle does go through the chunky paint, which you can kind of hear as my hands go over it, that it's pretty stiff. So that is one thing to keep in mind. If you want your fabric to continue to flow, you're going to want to use a dye and not a paint. And the dye is also going to be pretty hard to keep from bleeding, but that's something that I plan on getting to eventually. But this method is great for jersey, it's great for a woven, it's great for stretch lycra. I used to be part of a mermaid guild online, and people would talk all the time about painting their mermaid tails with this paint. I just used the speedball paint. I'm sure that there's a variety of different screen printing paints online, but it's affordable and easily accessible, so that's all I used. And honestly, without any further introduction, I think it's time to just get into the video. For this project, you're going to need some printer paper, pencil with an eraser, some scissors, some clear plastic tape. I prefer to use the packing tape because it's really thick, a surface that you can use to protect while cutting, and an X-Acto knife or a very small box cutter like this one. So first you'll need a design on your paper. There we go. And then what you're going to do is you're going to take your clear plastic tape and you're going to put it all the way down on the face of your design, only on the front part. You can do the back part as well, but I find that the texture of the paper actually helps grip onto the fabric and keep it from sliding. Next, what you're going to do is you're going to cut out your design. I find that you have a certain direction that is easiest to go, and it's really good to just rotate your paper and make sure that you're cutting in that direction, just so that your lines are cleaner and smoother. And now, because I want my leaf to be two-toned, I'm going to take my first stencil and lay it down on a blank piece of paper, and I'm going to sketch out the holes that I already have. And then I'm going to design my second screen that'll go over top of my first one in a different color. So I'm basically just going to draw these little lines where I want them to go to connect my stem to my leaves. Then cover that piece of paper in tape and go ahead and cut the design out with your X-Acto knife, the exact same way you did before, but of course with a new design. The basics of this method are that your positive space is being cut out of a piece of paper, and that provides the limitation that your negative space has to be rooted to the rest of the stencil. So if you were to, for example, try to cut a bullseye design, you would just wind up with one big circle, because the largest circle would cut out all of the interior stuff. But I find that this limitation is actually pretty easy to work around once you wrap your head around it. and I actually quite like working around limitations. I find that it makes me push myself in new ways and come up with designs that I otherwise wouldn't have, but to each their own. Now, for the actual printing, you're going to need a palette knife, a little makeup sponge like this one, and a place to mix your paint in. And then of course you're also going to need some speedball paints or any other fabric safe paint really, as long as it's not super thick or super runny and you can blot it with your makeup sponge. If you're going to do this for yourself, I would highly recommend watching some YouTube videos about color theory or paint mixing. I'm really lucky in that both my parents were artists at one point, so I know quite a bit about color mixing and it has come rather naturally to me, but yeah, I'm not really sure how to explain that to a beginner, but I made this nice green color and I started with that, and I did a test print on a piece of paper of that little leaf to make sure it was the color that I wanted. And then I took my first mold of my palm frond and I put my base color in the pattern, or well, I painted my base color into the stencil and onto my little shorts. If you're wondering, I didn't really pattern place for this one. I kind of just wung it and did what I thought would look nice on each individual piece. There's not really like a set pattern in my head, but I think it looked nice in the final product and I didn't feel like it was too cluttered or overly chaotic or anything. But there also wasn't a ton of order to it, so. I wound up using my same dark forest green for the center part of my Monstera leaf. I don't know if it's actually a Monstera leaf, but that's kind of what I took the inspiration for it from. Then I added a ton of white to my green color to lighten it up, and I did the outside of my Monstera leaf. And then I took a bunch of yellow and white and added that to my already lightened forest green to make the center stem part for my palm fronds. I find that it's really easy to just mix colors as I go in the same pot, because then I wind up with a more cohesive color story because they're all kind of from the same batch. At one point, I decided that I really didn't like one of the leaf designs and I tried to wash it out of my fabric before it was fully set, but that didn't really wind up working, so I had to cover it with another leaf design. And it turned out pretty good, I think, for the most part. And that's a huge part of the reason why I like this method so much, because in a pinch, you really can just make a brand new screen and cover something up and fix things while you're already in the middle of printing and you have paint mixed up and ready to go. One other thing that I decided to change last minute was I painted on by hand a really dark stem on these big leaves. And I really think that it added something to the final look. I blended it in with my finger really nice, and I think it just adds a lot of depth and realism to the leaf. All in all, I think the final product is pretty nice. I don't know if I will wind up using those back patch pockets, but I have them for another project. Well, thanks for sticking around. I hope that this video was helpful for you and that you stay around for the next one as well. And let me know down in the comments what designs you think I should try next, because I'm definitely going to be trying this again. I think that this method has a lot of merit that could be explored, so we're going to have to come back to this one. That's your idea of messing it with me?
Oh,
just
making funny faces at you, yeah.
Oh my god.